Ever since I've been in the hospitality industry, I have been hearing one thing over and over again. Direct bookings are always better. And for a long time I believed that too. But after doing my own research on the topic, I've come to a different conclusion. I think it depends. In this video I want to explain what it depends on by looking at the economics of direct bookings. Let's start with something that often gets ignored. Direct bookings are not free. They feel free because there is no commission invoice at the end, but they still cost money. Every direct booking has a customer acquisition cost. And in distribution, customer acquisition cost is really the only number that matters. It's simply the cost of generating a sale for a new customer. In e-commerce, some companies are perfectly fine losing money on the first sale. In other words, their acquisition cost is higher than the profit they make on the first transaction. They do this because they understand their customers very well. They know that on average, a customer might purchase 3 or 4 times over the next few months. So even if the first transaction is unprofitable, the overall relationship isn't. In those cases, it's just a cash flow issue. They lose money in month 1, break even in the second month, and turn a profit later. On the other end of the spectrum, there are businesses with negative acquisition costs, which means they actually make money while acquiring customers. That's possible today because some social media platforms pay creators for content. And if those creators sell products inside the content, customer acquisition itself generates revenue. Customer acquisition cost is different for every business. Some companies can afford to spend more to acquire customers because they know that they will make the money back over time. Others simply can't. What matters is not the channel itself, but how much it actually costs to generate a sale. In hospitality, we often assume that direct bookings have no costs. So we compare the free direct bookings to 15% commission, which isn't a fair comparison. For example, if your direct acquisition cost is around 7% and your OTA commission is 15%, then the OTA booking is only 8% more expensive than your direct channel. So instead of asking if a booking is direct or not, the real question is whether you could have acquired the same booking for less. That's the only comparison that actually matters. Once we start looking at it this way, we see that not every booking can be captured directly. Some guests are just loyal to their OTA. They use the same platform every time. They trust it and they don't want to think too much about it. And no matter how good your website is or how strong your direct offer is or how much you spend on marketing even, those guests will still book through the OTA. Trying to convert them directly is either not possible or it would often cost more than the commission you are trying to avoid. Yet, hotels often treat every OTA booking as a lost direct booking, when in reality many of those bookings were never realistically available as direct bookings in the first place. This reminds me a lot of what happened with Nike. A few years ago, Nike decided to go all in on direct-to-consumer distribution. They cut off many of their retail partners because they wanted to own the customer relationship and achieve higher margins. At first, it looked like a bold and visionary move. The business media loved it. But what they underestimated was how much demand actually came from those partners. Once those relationships were gone, they realized that it cost them more to reach the same customers on their own. Not only that, but all of the risk shifted back to them. They had to move the inventory themselves. They had to pay upfront for marketing and hoping that the demand would convert. Eventually, they had to rebuild many of those partnerships because revenue was falling. It was too late when they realized that forcing everything into direct didn't make economic sense. And I think it's very similar to what happens in hospitality. OTAs drive demand that many hotels simply couldn't generate on their own, or at least not at a lower cost than the commission they pay. OTAs also take on a lot of risk because hotels don't pay upfront. They only pay once the booking has already generated revenue, and that by itself is a very valuable service. And yet, because commissions are visible and recurring in every month, they feel painful. So the conversation often becomes emotional instead of economic. What all of this leads to is a slightly different way of looking at the problem. Because when you strip away the emotions around commissions and distribution channels, you start to see a pattern. What I've come to realize is that instead of trying to increase direct bookings at all costs, what would be more beneficial is having more control and visibility over demand. Because once you have this control and visibility, things become much more clear. You can see whether you're actually leaving money on the table, and you can finally compare channels based on comparable data. That's when distribution becomes something you actively manage and make data-driven decisions. You can spend more and get bookings when occupancy is low, or spend less when you are actually full. And you can understand in real time what guests are actually willing to pay. It would completely reframe the direct versus OTA battle, because now you could see in real data how expensive OTA commissions actually are for your property. The only way to get this level of control is by owning the full journey, from the first interest until the final booking. But the problem is that most hotels don't have the structure to achieve this. They have the top of funnel and they have the bottom of funnel, but they are missing the middle. And that's where everything breaks, because like this, digital sales is disconnected from marketing efforts. So you don't actually know who considered booking, you don't know why they didn't book, and you can't improve anything systematically. That's also why the marketing double spend problem exists that I talked about in my second video. Guests visit your website, they don't book. Later, they book through an OTA. You paid to generate the demand, and then you paid commission on top of it. But because there is no feedback loop, you can't see it, you can't measure it, and you can't fix it. For this, the only thing that's missing in hospitality is a proper end-to-end funnel. Every other industry that sells online to consumers already sells this way, so it's already a proven framework. Hotels are one of the few that don't own their end-to-end funnel, and I think that's exactly where the opportunity is to improve direct distribution in the future. Thank you for watching.